We now continue with Smurf.
I have a personal experience that happened to me a long time ago. To this day, even though I know it happened, I still can't help but feel disconnected from the memory. When I remember it, it almost feels like it happened to someone else, like I'm watching the event from a different perspective in my head. Anyway, so I am not from America, I am actually from Europe, and I won't be telling you exactly where. This happened to me back in the 1990s, when I was still working as a lighthouse keeper in a pretty remote location. The way it was set up was that this lighthouse was on a landmass that was isolated and a little bit out to sea away from the mainland. Like an island, I guess, but I don't know if I'd fully refer to it as that, because when you think island, you think big. By boat, it probably took a couple of hours or so from the mainland to get to, so while help was never far away, there was a slight wait. Anyway, so by the 1990s, most lighthouses in Europe were fully automated, and I probably was not far away from being one of the last lighthouse keepers in the entire world, which is a weird thing to think about. Even though I wasn't in a location as remote as some others in the world, it's such an isolating feeling. Knowing that you were the only person on that patch of land with no one around for miles really does something to your brain. It makes you think and act differently on a subconscious level. After a few weeks, you start talking out loud more than you should. You don't even notice that you're doing it. You're just having full-blown conversations with yourself. Even if you were an introvert and enjoyed being alone, this could quickly become a living nightmare if you were not able to find the right routine and mindset. The job was pretty easy, and I don't want to bore you with all of the details of it, because I think any adult with half a brain knows what lighthouse keepers do. I suppose everything first started when I started having these horrible night terrors. I dreamed that the landmass I was on just had an entirely black void around it, and that I had nowhere to go. In these dreams, I would lose control of my body and be forced to watch myself step off the edge of reality and fall endlessly. When I would wake up, I would be covered in sweat and find myself wandering around the lighthouse. I even found myself down by the sea one time, which put me on really high alert. Anything could have happened. I could have ended up washed out to sea and dead. I was worrying to myself, thinking I might have to tie myself to the bed to stop myself from dying. These dreams came out of nowhere too. I'd been out there maybe a month and boom, nightmares for a week straight. Always a similar thing, and I always woke up somewhere away from my bed. One time, I found myself sat flat on my ass with bits of wood planks crumpled beneath me. In my sleep, I had somehow obliterated a crate that gets used to store rope. I had put on some weight, but this was just ridiculous. Anyway, so on the day that my experience happened, I remember I was up pretty early and was just watching the seagulls flying around. There was a group of them, all swarming around overhead near the shore, and I was interested in what they were doing. They were circling in this almost tornado formation, where some were flying above the others and must have been at it for a while. I'd actually heard them being pretty loud before I woke up, but I was desperate to get some more sleep that morning. So, a seagull here and there starts breaking off from the pack. While the others are still circling, I see one swoop down towards the shoreline, but it does not come back up with anything. When it comes back up, it flies back into the formation, and I see another swoop down, and then another. This happens for maybe a minute or more, until I see one swoop down, and it does not come back up. After not seeing it come up after about 30 seconds, this is when the rest of the formation of them just scatters, like completely scatters. They don't scatter in formation or even in pairs. Almost every single one of those seagulls let out this ear-piercing screech and then scattered in a different direction to the rest. I was really curious by this point and wanted to know what was going on. I finished sipping on some water and kept watching the shoreline, trying to figure out where the hell the other seagull went. It's possible it was flying low to the water and disappeared from my eyeline, but it would have had to have been quick and sneaky. But it was not long before I spotted something bobbing in the water by the shore and slowly drifting out with the waves. I used my binoculars to confirm what I feared, and I indeed saw a seagull, belly up, just bobbing up and down, not moving whatsoever. I'm not exactly an animal lover, but man, was that a depressing sight. I made my way down to the shoreline because I could not think of any reason how this could possibly happen. I've never seen a seagull just mess up a dive bomb before, but even if it did, surely there is no way one could die on impact from that height against the waves. Maybe I'm wrong. The sun was high in the sky by this point, and I could feel the heat bearing down on me. It was nice to have some decent weather out here at this point, because before then, it had been nothing but rough wind and rain. When I got to the shoreline, I genuinely recoiled and looked away and took a few steps back at first, because I just saw this large mass right on the shoreline. It was just stationary, and the waves were just coming up and hitting it with no movement. Before I even got down there, I could smell something vile. Weirdly enough, it kind of smelled like chlorine at first, but after that, it started to smell almost like rotten eggs. The mass on the shoreline was a dead seal. Only not exactly, because it looked like it had been put on a diet. Its blubber was almost non-existent. It looked mummified almost. It would have explained the seagull floating in the water, if not for the fact that it did not look freshly dead. I could barely get close to it, because just looking at it gave me an overwhelming urge to puke. I didn't really have anything other than a big stick to prod it with, and when I touched it, the seal felt oddly light, when these are some heavy-ass creatures. Even the smallest seals are like 100 pounds. But yeah, even just prodding it with my stick, it was incredibly easy to shift. I couldn't move it entirely, but I could roll it a little and shift its weight. Man, this is gonna sound weird, but I knew I would not be able to relax or even sleep, just knowing it was there on the island, even if it wasn't in my eyeline. Even just the thought of it rotting away on the island made me feel sick. There wasn't exactly protocol for this, and maybe this was a little bit inhumane of me, but while looking away and trying to hold my breath at the same time, I kinda kicked it a little bit. I kicked it just enough to be able to eventually roll it, and I kept rolling it with my foot just enough until it was into the water and it made a little splash. That was good enough for me, as long as it was away from me, as long as it wasn't on the island. Man, when I was kicking it, even though I was trying to look, I took a few peeks, and I could see the skin sagging whenever it rolled. The skin looked so weird and stretchy and leather at the same time, and I could not look anymore. It looked like the skin was way too big. Like I said, it was mummified. The blubber was almost all gone, so it just looked like a suit that was way too big for an animal. I did not have the guts to look at it up close. My day was completely boring after that. Really nothing much of note. I spent the day doodling, since at the time I fancied myself as an up-and-coming artist, and figured I would become a pro by the end of my time. Didn't work out like that though, unfortunately. I had another night terror that night, but it did not involve the usual. I actually barely remembered it, because it woke me up in the middle of the night, and I went back to sleep and forgot most of it. The nightmare was just something like being strapped down to my bed and being unable to move ever again. Like in my nightmare, all I could do was lay there and stare at the ceiling for days until I lost my mind. Way scarier than any of those other nightmares. So, anyway, I woke up in the middle of the night, sweating and needing a drink of water. I think this was the first time I had a nightmare where I was not outside of my bed. I took a peek outside the window, as I usually do, just to check that there were no problems, and I thought I could make something out. I could see some faint dark shape in the distance near the shore. It was just a lump, and all I could think to myself was, damn it, the seal must have washed back up again. But I was so incredibly tired I just fell right back asleep. I woke up early that morning again. It barely felt like I'd slept at all, but I was hearing some sounds outside that roused me. I can't quite remember the sounds exactly, but they were not pleasant. I don't even know what I assumed they were. I can't remember. When I finally managed to get myself up properly and took a look outside, I saw a shape down on the ground outside, but it was nowhere near the shore now. It was halfway up the path to the lighthouse. There was no seal. I pulled out my binoculars, even though I didn't really need them. There was this thing that was just very slowly moving up the path, slithering almost. I could see it vibrating ever so slightly when I used my binoculars, and it was moving side to side, but only by a tiny amount. I'd go as far as to say only millimeters to the left and right, kind of rapidly. The path behind it was darker, like it had been soaked with water from the tide. This thing, it was thicker than my forearm from what I could see. It looked slimy. It was this color that was almost navy, but darker than that. But it had these patches of green, like it had a cluster of moles or something. It had these things sticking out of its head. They were just stalks. I could not see any eyes or a mouth or anything. It was just moving at a steady pace, and I had never seen anything like it before. I was half thinking of contacting the shore and telling them, but what could I tell them? Hey, guys, I have an oversized slug currently invading my lighthouse. I would have been fired on the spot. I just watched it and watched it as it kept moving up the path. While I was watching, I noticed it was not the only one. There was another shape lagging behind that was down near the shore. It looked like it was barely out of the water. If it wasn't impossible, I would have assumed it was the most elaborate prank ever pulled. I actually went up and opened the glass window, which you're not really supposed to do. It's supposed to remain closed to help protect the lighthouse from the elements. Anyway, I did so, and stuck my head outside, only to be hit by that same horrible smell from yesterday. Chlorine and rotten eggs. And when I stuck my head outside, I caught sight of a shape right below me, and I screamed like a little girl, and closed the window on instinct. There was a shape, a large mass, attached to the side of the lighthouse. I recoiled all the way away from the window, and was trying to calm myself down. I felt like I could not move. I could not get the smell out of my nose, and I felt frozen, and like I could not look away from the glass window. And over the next few minutes, I watched as that shape started to come into view. It just slivered and took a while, but eventually, it was completely over the glass and just sat there. I did not see anything on its body, or at least, not that I remember. It was just this big, wrinkly mass. It was bigger than I first thought. It was more like 2 forearms pressed together. I just stared. I wished I had a camera so I could document it. I tried to make a shitty doodle of it as I had my pen and paper close by, but like I said, I never made it as an artist. Actually, hold on. I drew this one after finishing writing out the story for you all, and I came back to put it here before I posted. Forgive how bad it looks, and the size being completely off, and basically everything being completely off. They didn't even really look like that. This is just how I remember it in my mind. I just watched as it just kind of pulsed there or vibrated. I watched for maybe 5 minutes until I started to hear the sound, and before I knew it, I could see a tiny crack in the glass. And then I started to hear that sound but louder as the crack started to splinter. I knew I was in huge trouble and that I would have to contact the mainland, and I did. I was screaming at them something about the glass being broken and that there was some kind of creature on the side of the lighthouse and that I needed help. The guy on the other side of the radio kept asking me to repeat myself, which I did, before he sounded just fed up and told me that someone will be coming over in a few hours. I went back and watched a little bit longer, until, crash, the glass just completely gave way, and I see this thing hit the floor with a squelching sound. It sounded like it was full of water. I was freaked out, but at the same time, I had this weird compulsion to just go up and poke it. It sounds crazy typing it out now, but I don't know what came over me. I had never seen anything like it before, and I know it broke the glass, but I just thought it was fat. I didn't think I was in real danger. I was only so panicked on the radio because the glass broke and I knew my job was in danger. No way anyone would believe how it actually broke. I still had that large stick from the day before. I don't know why I didn't throw it away. So I grabbed it and prodded at this thing from an arm's length away. It did not really react when I did. The skin where I prodded it kinda sank in a little and then came back up like a memory foam mattress. It still smelled horrible though, and so I decided that I was going to kick it away and outside like I did with the seal. I went to kick it, and the thing instantly gave way to the pressure of my foot. I looked away while doing it because it was grossing me out, but when I was trying to move it, I noticed I could not feel it sliding or rolling across the floor, and when I looked back, this thing was wrapped around my leg. It was wrapped around my leg like a snake. It had stretched itself thinner around my leg, which did not make sense to me, and I could feel it vibrating. I was wearing short pants because of the sun. It was the first time I got to wear them the entire month. I could feel these little jolts on my leg of what felt like tiny static electricity zaps, and it tickled a little bit, so I started trying to lift my leg to kick this thing off. But I couldn't. It was so heavy. I think it was because it was heavy, but I also felt like my leg was becoming weaker. You can call me crazy and tell me this is impossible, but the fat around my lower leg, I could have sworn it looked a tiny bit skinnier than my other one. Bear in mind that this all happened so quickly, so I had to process it all at once and make split-second decisions, even if they were stupid. I wasn't stood there gawking and letting this thing tickle me to death for 5 minutes like an idiot, so I took the stick and I just started beating this thing. I hit it and hit it, but its skin was just going in, and it was not even reacting. It wasn't until I struck this thing on one of its stalks that it receded into its head insanely quickly, and instantly, I felt all of the pressure just release in one go. And once it did, I just ran. I ran out of that room and shut the door, and I practically galloped down those steps to lock myself into another room that was windowless. Every time I moved the leg that thing was attached to, it was shaking like crazy, and once I got near the bottom, my leg actually gave way, and I hit the deck. I'm lucky I was able to break the fall with my hands. After that, I just limped into another room and barricaded myself in. There wasn't a clock in that room, so all I could do was just sit there and listen and hope that someone would show up soon. I started to feel really dehydrated at one point, like I had not drank a sip of water in weeks, days, I don't know. My mouth was bone dry, it was horrible, it was like I was in a desert. After a while, I actually started to drift in and out of sleep after what I assume was a couple of hours. I got woken up again when I heard someone calling my name, and I scrambled to my feet and unbarricaded the door to try and make myself not look totally crazy. 2 men were sent to get me, and they asked me what was going on because I sounded really weird on the radio. At first, I asked them if they saw anything on the island, and all I got was a blank stare and a really drawn out no. So I tried not to mention any details that would get me locked up. I don't even remember the excuse I gave for the glass, but it was bad. They gave me the most foul looks, and the entire ride back on the boat, I got the silent treatment. I only found out later that I had been in that room for around 6 hours. They had been delayed due to horrible weather. Weird because it was pretty nice outside just before I went in that room. When I got back to the mainland finally, my boss wanted to talk to me. It went as terribly as you would expect. He asked me again about the glass, and I just sat there looking at him for like a minute straight in silence, trying to think of any good excuse at all. He then proceeded to tell me that my lighthouse was scheduled for automation and that work would begin on it immediately. He thanked me, almost reluctantly, and then told me that my services would no longer be required. And that's genuinely the end of my experience. I just need someone here to tell me that I'm not crazy, because to this day, I have no idea what I saw or what happened to me, and I feel like I need to know. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. I have got a story from working with my dad. We work for a drain cleaning service on the East Coast, so we are mostly in basements pretty much the whole day. A lot of the houses are old, especially in this shitty town that our idiot dispatcher always sends us to, so the basements are usually pretty small and short, which is a bitch for someone who is 6'2". Anyways, we get to the job. We wait a while for the tenant to show up. This guy with a walker and COPD comes up. There is nothing creepy about him. I don't know if he was a tenant or maintenance or what. I mean, he was overweight. He had a breathing problem and COPD, so I doubt he was maintenance. He opens up the basement for us. We are checking the drains. Everything seems alright. My dad comes back from the back of the place. The old guy says there is a room further back. My dad sends me in there so I can turn off the lights and stuff after looking in the back room. I head towards the back room. The door is really hard to open. I finally get it open, It's a cold day, but this room was legit freezing. There were some boxes stacked up, blocking the view of the left side of the room. I moved some boxes so I can actually see the rest of the room. I thought this room was small, but it's actually large. I decided I should go further into the room. There are two sides, separated by an old wooden wall. I hear something fall down. Not a loud clanging or anything, just like if a bunch of leaves were to scrape against a concrete floor. All lights are still off. The only light is from the basement window, which is a small rectangle. In the little area of light I see a shadow move from one side of the room to the other, just before the wall. Alright, I'm not that easily spooked. I turn the lights on, I check the drains, whatever. But then, it gets time to leave. The way this place is set up is there is a door on the side, then a door to get in that has a window, and then an old wooden door before that one that leads to the rooms in the back. Everyone else has gone outside already. I get stuck locking up and turning the lights off. I get to the door with the window. It's so annoying to close. I am struggling to get the lock to go for a while. I start getting anxious out of nowhere. I look up. The other side of the door is almost completely black. I see the old wooden door to the back rooms open up, which makes it get a little bit brighter, and I see the outline of a hand holding onto the side of it. Shit. I slam the door shut. It finally latches. Thank God for that. I sprint up the small flight of stairs and slam the other door behind me. My dad and the COPD guy are looking at me weird. We had to go back to that same place later that day because we could not get into the first floor the first time, and I forgot to close one of the doors. Usually, the only things I see are shit and weird things people flush down their toilets. I only come to act recreationally, but this experience has me questioning everything. I was around 25 years old when this one happened to me. I was driving home from work at 4 a.m. I worked behind the bar in a nightclub at the time, so you know how it is. It was a nice night actually. I wasn't really tired at all. I was ready to get home and watch some TV for a few hours before I go to bed and repeat the process. I pull into my driveway and instantly notice that something is off. All of my lights are off inside the house when I usually leave the living room and bedroom light on. I decide to investigate. I leave my car running in case I need to get the hell out of there in a flash. I unlock my front door and walk inside. I notice just how cold the house is, and I look through my dining room window to see that the back door has had all of the glass smashed out of it. Weird. Nothing seems to be stolen or even touched for that matter. I decide it's best to go to my friend's house and call the police. I get in the car to leave, and as I reverse out of my driveway, I see a tall as hell figure standing in my living room window, but I cannot make out any features because of the darkness. Nope. I speed off out of there, faster than a cheetah on steroids. About 2 weeks after this shit happened, I came home from work to find my house on fire. Mega nope. This happened 3 days after the break-in. I have a new door put in already, because screw the cold weather. I am just getting ready to go to work. I got my t-shirt, jeans, and a bag with an extra pair of clothes in case a customer decides it's a good idea to throw booze at me. The break-in is still on my mind, and I am slightly paranoid about my house as a whole. I started feeling like I am being watched whenever I pass the large living room window during the night. I feel uneasy being anywhere downstairs at night. I constantly see stuff moving out of the corner of my eye. I play it off as my imagination. Yeah, that's it, thump. Oh, for fuck's thump. It sounds like someone is bouncing a huge basketball hard down onto the ground from my roof. I have no idea what the hell it is. I feel the house shake whenever it hits the roof. I go outside to see if I can see it from the ground. Nothing at all. Weird. Maybe my dish fell down or something? Yeah, that'll be it. Oh crap, I'm late for work. I go back inside and get my bag. I sling it over my shoulder. As I reach the bottom of the stairs, I hear what sounds like someone throwing a desk chair down behind me, but when I turn around to look, there is nothing there at all. Nope, I'm out. I drive to work. I come home and find that my bedroom window is wide open, more than wide enough for someone to climb through. I leave that window closed and locked at all times because the wind catches it if I so much as leave it open a crack. I live on the top floor. No way someone could have opened it up without being on the roof. No thank you, not tonight. I call my girlfriend and go and stay with her for the night. That's all I got for now. This happened to me in winter 2009. I was driving home from a friend's house. It's about 9 p.m. I am driving through town. I see an old man sitting at a bus stop. I slow down for a closer look. He is easily 80 plus years old. He looks like he is freezing. He is not wearing a coat or anything. I pull over and walk over to him. I tell him that the buses are not running tonight. He looks up at me and nods. I offer him a ride. Yes, please. I help him into my car and we start driving. He tells me that he lives not too far away. It's about a 15-minute drive. I try and make some small talk with him. He is not talking, only sniffing. I turn up the heat a little bit more. The entire ride, he barely says anything. We pull up to his house. I drove as close as I can to the front door. He does not want help getting inside. I ask him if he is going to be okay. He turns to me and places his hand on my shoulder. Tears stream down his face as he barely whispers, "She found someone else." He nods to me and gets out of the car. He stands at the front door for a bit before going in. Those words still haunt me to this day. It killed me to see such a fragile old man cry his eyes out and then say something like that. It makes me wonder what happened. Did his wife of many years cheat on him? Did his daughter leave her husband for someone else? I live in a small town where everyone knows everyone, so it was pretty easy to find info on what was going on. The man was a welder for almost 50 years. He did welding a few towns over, so was rarely seen in my hometown despite living there. His wife was alive and well during that time. However, now both have passed away. I never did find out the full story, but those words will stick with me forever. I bought a drone to capture some images here in Jalisco, but due to cartel activity, I could not fly it, so I just kept it in its box for a few months until I got the chance to go to vacations to my hometown in Veracruz when I went to visit my great-grandparents in a small village. I was there visiting my great-grandparents and cousins, who happened to be teenagers, and they were amazed by the drone I had bought. So we went on to fly it and show them how we could see from the iPad in real time where it was flying and what it was seeing from up above. We got back to the house and my grandpa was there and told me that he had seen those before back in his days. I asked him when it was, and he said it was back around the 1940s. I thought he was just joking, but he is a pretty dead serious old man who served in the Mexican Revolution with Pancho Villa, La Famosa Bula. That's what they were called back then, the Bula. I asked him, how did he know it was a drone? He said that he and his brothers used to herd cows back then, and back then, it was legal to carry guns, shotguns, and everything needed to protect your cattle from thieves or wolves. So he was outside with his brothers, taking care of their herd, and saw something weird that was above them, and it hummed really hard. So they thought it was some kind of weird bird, and they started shooting it, he and his brothers. When the drone saw it was being shot at, the drone started shooting back. Obviously, they did not know it was a drone. They thought it was a weird bird. Everybody ran, and since they had horses, it took some time for the drone to catch any of them. My great-grandfather said he hid behind a tree and aimed towards the drone and somehow hit it. The drone fell, and he and his brothers went to take a look at the bird. Upon taking a closer look at it, they saw it was not a bird. They hit their shotguns, and it felt like metal. So they did not know what it actually really was. My great-grandpa said it looked the same as my drone. Since they were on the Sierra, they saw up in the mountain some people dressed in weird suits coming down. My great-grandpa and his brothers were really scared, so they loaded their guns and hid. When these people arrived, picked up the drone, and somebody speaking Spanish asked them to come out. My great-grandpa says they told them that if they ever see one of these things, to not shoot them, and they opened up a briefcase and gave him a really good amount of money to each of them to buy up some land, and some even bought horses and more cattle. These weird people dressed in weird suits just told them not to talk about the incident with anybody, My great-grandpa told me that's how he built the house, with that money. When I describe it, it does not sound that creepy, but in reality it was. I was a kid, and got in trouble for fighting with my brothers, so I was crying and ran to my bedroom, locked my door, and hid underneath a blanket. I was lying on my stomach and felt two hands press against my back. I thought it was my dad, but I remember thinking it was weird for him to put two hands on my back like that, and I did not hear anyone come inside. I looked to see what it was, and nobody was in the room, and my door was still locked. There was no doubt about it, none at all. Someone bigger than me placed two hands on my back, and they pressed rather hard. I remember being so confused, and this happened at daytime too. I stopped crying because I was just so confused. I asked my dad if he had come into the room, and he said no, which made sense because the door was locked. I just could not make sense of it. When we moved out of that apartment, I found out that a baby had died in my room a couple of months before we moved in. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, because the hands that touched me definitely belonged to an adult. To this day, I have no explanation. I've seen things that I could not explain, like walking alone at midnight and seeing a ball of light the size of a baseball pass about 6 feet above my head when I was about 25 years old that I could not explain at all. And I've had some extremely frightening dreams, but that feeling of having those hands on my back, although it was not my scariest memory, is definitely the weirdest, because there is no doubt at all that it happened, and there is literally no explanation, and it felt so realistic.